Right, so today I wanted to start by talking about this announcement from Jason Kenney. And he says Alberta government has effectively shut down the temporary foreign worker program. During this crisis, it's more important than ever that Albertans come first for available jobs. Now, there's a lot of bad news going on these days, and I mean, a lot of people like to ignore that. Or another thing that really bothers me is people like to make things that aren't really that bad news appear as bad news, and I'll get to that in the next thing. But this is a very good thing. But just how far are they going to go? I don't know. But any time that we can get a cut in immigration in pretty much any way, shape, or form, it's going to be a good thing. There is probably some rare exceptions to that, but and again, that doesn't mean that people always twist that and oh, you're a racist or no, that's such a terrible argument. It's not even funny. The reason that people want immigration is for two main reasons. I think it's cheap labor. So it helps the corporations. Again, the left hates the corporations so much apparently, but they love it when corporations get to exploit people for cheap labor, right? Because if there was no mass immigration over the last decade or two, or at the very least a actual reasonable amount, which is probably like 10 times less than we've had, guess what? The employers would be lining up to hire people rather than the other way around. Anybody who's in the job market right now, at least the vast majority of people, probably have recognized that things are really tough out there right now. Things are really tough out there. The only people that seem to be talking about how things are just fine are the people that are on their guaranteed, the union workers and all the public school teachers. And they're complaining about the virus with a death rate that's less than the flu, but you know if they face the slightest little threat, then that's the worst thing in the world, and society has to bend over backwards for them. But if 100,000 people in the private sector lose their jobs over the last 5 to 10 years in Alberta, oh, that's perfectly fine, right? So again, the hypocrisy really knows no bounds when it comes to this kind of stuff. Um, and then that's a big problem. But again, like I say, one of the biggest policies the government should be implementing now is a big cut to immigration for many reasons. Number one, like I say, number one, it's cheap labor, right? It drives down wages. And again, the very ironic thing about this is I always give people this example. Even Bernie Sanders in 2016 was against mass immigration because he said it's for cheap labor. He said that that's what the big corporations like it. He actually said it was a Koch brothers idea, which I don't think is necessarily true. But the point he's getting at is that the big corporations like it. And again, this is Bernie Sanders 2016. I mean, a lot of people probably didn't realize it. Now again, he changed his mind, just last year because the left has gone so far off the left that even Bernie Sanders 2016 isn't far enough to the left for a pretty good percent of the population, which is again another reason why whenever you hear people think that the left hasn't gone off the deep end, it's just insanity that you talk to these people that you know a major position that Bernie Sanders had in 2016 is considered too radical for these people. So again, that's another point I want to bring up. But again, those are the big things. The other big thing when it comes to immigration is that the left loves it because it's votes for them. The right likes it because the cheap labor, the corporations love it, and the left loves it for both reasons because and not to mention too, that can also be a very big incentive. The left would really love it because if wages aren't going up, then that just creates more and more of an incentive for the government to need to offer up welfare programs and government assistance and all that kind of garbage, right? Because if wages aren't going up, but inflation's ticking along at 2-3% a year. I mean, I think it's been more over the last year. Um, and again, the official government numbers on inflation, I think, are pretty off. But even if you go by the official numbers, it's still ticking along at like 2% a year. But nonetheless, like I say, you have inflation going at 2% a year, but wages haven't gone up in the last 2 decades, right? And there's ways that the government messed with that. But if you look at real median wages, not household income, not any of that kind of garbage. I mean, real median wages. They haven't gone up for 20 years, right? Maybe even a little bit more, depending on where you're at. And that's a big problem. That is one of the biggest problems. And why is that? Because it's not because of the greedy corporations. It's because of this is the thing that really bothers me. It's really about the left's greed, right? Because the left wants the mass immigration. The mass immigration is what is driving down the wages and what is keeping people poor, right? Because like I said, if if there was no mass immigration, we wouldn't have to run nearly as big a deficits, right? Because, one of the main reasons we have to run massive deficits is because we got to pay for free healthcare and welfare for people who don't work. And immigrants from the third world are a lot more likely, and again, I've made videos citing government statistics on this, so no one can refute it, that, immigrants from the third world specifically are about twice as likely to be on welfare. Just a fact of life, right? So the more immigrants from the third world you bring in, the more money that the government's going to have to either tax people or have deficits to pay for that, right? Now again, the temporary foreign worker program is people who come into work, to be fair, but it's still the same spirit, right? It's still the same spirit of mass immigration. And this is another crazy argument that people bring up. Well, Canadians don't want to do these jobs, right? Well, that's still not a good argument because that's only been an argument that they've been making very recently. And here's the thing. The reason why I think the main reason why Canadians don't want to do these jobs and Americans in the States is that they don't lead anywhere. They don't lead anywhere. Back in the day, you could take one of these jobs, one of these entry-level minimum wage jobs, and you work it for however many years you got to work it, you get promoted, you work your way up. Nowadays, a lot of these jobs, they are about as dead end can possibly be, right? So that's the one of the biggest problems. Now why is that? It's because, like I said, the job market is completely flooded. There is way too many regulations, and again, like I say, this is the point when I'm offering up solutions, because I pointed out the problem, so I want to offer up the solutions. The solution is to cut immigration, and I would say complete cut of immigration until the unemployment rate is below like 4%. We should have no immigration. There's no need to have immigration whatsoever before that unemployment rate isn't very low. After that, I would say no immigrants come in that are going to be net negatives on society. And here's the thing: people say, "Oh, you're so cold." No, it has nothing to do with that. Number one, because me personally, I've probably done way more to help the poor than 99% of people criticizing people that have my position. So let's complete hypocrites off the start. And number two, we can't afford it. The government's having to run a $500 billion deficit this year. And that number's, I mean, it probably will go down a little bit, but the days of deficits in the tens of billions of dollars, or God forbid, balanced budgets, those days are over until things go belly up and things get so bad that we are literally forced to run a balanced budget. Those days are over. So again, it would be nice. Like, this is what I always say, that if we could come up with a financially, fiscally feasible way, aside from taxing the you know what out of people and running massive deficits to give people free stuff, I would be all for it. But the only way that that's realistic is if we are literally so wealthy it's not even funny, or which again, that's probably never going to happen, or money, we can literally just print money in unlimited amounts and it never affect us, which again is purely insane. So again, there's pretty much no realistic scenario to where you can make mass immigration work. There's pretty much no realistic scenario. So anyway, the next thing to talk about is from 222 minutes here. Going after this CBC headline saying Alberta Health Services to lay off up to 11,000 staff, mostly through outsourcing. And again, 222 minutes, which is kind of like a parody of 22 minutes, which is like CBC propaganda, basically. Anyway, alternative headline, Alberta Health Services creates 11,000 private sector jobs. Alberta Health Services to lay off 11,000 staff, mostly through outsourcing. Now, again, this is what I brought up yesterday a little bit. I wanted to talk a little bit more about it because it's just the insanity and the ignorance of the average person. That you talk to one of these average people, and again, the big problem I have with people isn't that we disagree. The big problem isn't that we disagree, and with almost every political disagreement, it's not that we disagree. The big problem is either the fact that the people that disagree are they're so incredibly ignorant that they have literally no idea what they're talking about, which is a lot of them, but that's not all of them, or they're just flat out dishonest. And I think it's a combination of the two. That a lot of times it's not necessarily conscious dishonesty, but if they spent 5 minutes outside their echo chamber, they would realize that. So again, this is the problem, that there's people that genuinely believe that AHS is cutting 11,000 jobs. There's people that legitimately believe that. No, the reality is that they're just no longer union jobs, right? And here's the thing. I was talking about the whole dishonesty thing. If the people that were out protesting, right, like these crazy NDP supporters, if they actually were honest, they'd be saying something along the lines of, all we care about is the unions, right? Like, because the reality is that the real reason that they care about this is because when you have union jobs, that means money for the left, because unions, and not to mention too, they hold up the monopoly, right? Because unions nowadays, they don't exist for the reasons they did a generation or two ago. Unions they're not the same as they once were, especially in Canada. In the States, I would say they're maybe somewhat feasible and understandable. But nowadays, unions in Canada basically exist to, number one, maintain the monopoly on healthcare and schooling, right? I mean, schooling technically isn't a monopoly, but it's pretty damn close. So that's basically why they exist, right? And the reason that the real reason too, on top of that, is that when you have union workers, that means more money in the hands of the left, because the unions overwhelmingly, I think the numbers are at least 90%. They're like 90 to 95% of union money ends up in the hands of the NDP and the Liberals, right? Or at the very least, left wing causes, right? So the real reason that they're upset is that less money is going to end up in the hands of the NDP. If they were if these protesters were actually honest, that's what they would be saying. We're upset that you're taking away money from our preferred political side. If that's what they were protesting, that's what they were saying at the protest, I would at least respect them. I still disagree with them because I think that they are supporting a terrible system, but at the very least, they're honest, right? And this is the big problem with political disagreements these days, is that people just aren't honest. And it's almost exclusively on the left. I mean, people on the right do it a little bit as well, but the reason the fact that the left constantly has to straw man is kind of proof that it doesn't really happen on the right. Because again, when you're debating socialism, you don't really have to straw man socialism to make it look bad. You just point out the examples, right? So again, but if you want to straw man any other system that is to the right of socialism, yeah, you got to straw man, right? So again, that's another thing I wanted to bring up that I think is important. And again, like I say, the amount of people that genuinely believe that AHS is cutting those jobs, there's a lot of people that believe that, and they're so ignorant it's not even funny, right? So anyway, the next thing I wanted to talk about is from Drew Hernandez. He shows a video here saying Antifa knocked out a black man's teeth at a BLM, uh, beat a woman at a women's march. Yeah, so basically, long story short, this was a conservative black man who was at a BLM rally. I don't know exactly what happened, but long story short, they knocked out his teeth. They punched him in the face. I don't know how many times, but I mean, you can go check out the video if you really wanted. But yeah, the point of this being is that this is where the left is at. And here's the thing, like I always bring up too, a lot of people like to downplay this as, oh, it's not that bad. They're isolated incidents, which I don't think neither one is true. I think it is pretty bad. Number two, I don't think it's isolated incidents, but nonetheless, this stuff is going to continue to get worse and worse. This is what I've been bringing up for a long time now, that the political polarization is going to continue to get worse until the people that actually have their heads on straight, which is a surprisingly low amount of people these days, but I still think it's the majority. I still think that the majority of people can be convinced. And the reason I say that too is that if all hope was lost, then all the propaganda that the mainstream media pumps out and all the censorship that social media does, all of that stuff would be completely unnecessary, right? So there is definitely still hope out there. But again, the solution to this kind of stuff, like what's the solution to all the political polarization, is that these people need to be held to a much higher standard. And this is the problem. And I mean, you take social media, for example. Take social media, for example. If you are on the right and you hold opinions that are the least bit out there, right? Like the days of just the crazy people being banned are long gone. They're long gone. The New York Post their account's been locked for what, like 2 weeks now? I think it's at least a week, just because they posted a story that was true, as much as they like to tell you it isn't true. I mean, the reason that they think that it isn't true is because to definitively prove that it was true, you would have to do something that is illegal, right? Because obviously posting images that are very inappropriate, to say the least, of an underage person is illegal. So again, the left is saying, oh, they're unverified. Well, to do that, we would have to, and not to mention too, they have posted texts and emails that verify the other parts of it, right? So the only parts that technically aren't verified are the hunter is a pedo part. All the other stuff is verified, but nonetheless, we have to stop with the double standard, right? Like the bar is set sky high for the right, and the bar for the left is non-existent. And I think it's the centrists and the milquetoast conservatives, in my opinion, that are responsible for this, because these kind of people have no problem calling out the crazies on the right, which are pretty much non-existent, because they're so viciously vilified if they voice their crazy opinions, right? The problem is that the centrists and the milquetoast conservatives are deathly afraid to call out Antifa and BLM, because if they do, they'll be called racists and they'll be physically attacked. And Antifa likes to attack you, and they're showing up to people's houses. So again, um, if you call these people on the right out, you face little to no negative consequences. If you call the other side out, which is verifiably a lot more of a threat, you will be attacked, you will be viciously vilified, and you will be criticized to endless degrees. So that's why people don't do it, right? That's why people don't do it. So the last thing to bring up here is from Randy Hillier, linking to a Westphalian Times post saying the Trudeau Liberal government gave a $237 million pandemic-related contract for ventilators to a firm that had been created just 7 days before obtaining the contract, that the federal government overpaid by nearly $100 million. And again, he says, you know what, has been a boom for the corruption industry within politics. Yeah, and that is where we're at in politics these days. That's I mean, I'm not going to get into it just because it frustrates me so much, like so much that this kind of stuff is happening. Again, the left, like I always harp on the left, and they're such hypocrites. It's not even funny. And that they you have all these crazy NDP supporters in Alberta specifically, and I'm from Alberta, so obviously that's why I talk about them so much. But all they complain about, the entirety of what they complain about is the UCP and the corporate corruption. Like that's 99% of what they complain about. But yet stuff like this comes out, and crickets, right? And crickets. It's just pure insanity. Like it's pure insanity. And again, this is why things are so crazy these days, is that politics is it's gone so far off the deep end that I don't know if there's going to be bringing it back without a whole lot of suffering and a whole lot of uncomfortable conversations. And again, thank God that there is people like Randy Hillier that are out there speaking the truth. He's one of the only politicians, both federally and provincially, that I actually trust in this whole situation. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't follow him, make sure you go give him a follow, because, like I say, he's one of the only people out there that I actually trust. And if you don't follow him, you definitely should. But nonetheless, make sure you share these stories around too. Like that's very important as well. But anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. If you liked the video, make sure you hit that like and subscribe. If you haven't already, make sure you check out those other links in the description. Follow me on Twitter. Follow me on BitChute, Parler. I also got some links in there if you'd like to support me. Again, I appreciate anything that people can do to help me out. I appreciate. So that's the video for today. So stay tuned for more.